Shabbat Shalom.
Я не могу вообще не сказать сейчас всем женщинам, это здорово, что вы есть.
Jetzt kann ich nicht sagen, ich muss sagen, allen Frauen und Schwestern in diesem Saal.
Now I cannot say nothing, but I have to say our sisters, the ladies here, wonderful that you are there. So my congratulations for the holiday, not for the birthday. And this holiday should last forever. I read in the Bible, and I was to pen down a sermon, and I stumbled because of one line. And the line is in the Gospel of John. There was a man sent from God, and his name was ... These dots I put there because all of a sudden I understood that those people sent from God, that there were many people who were sent from God. It was not just John, there were many more. And we are going to read in Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3.
Я благословлю благословляющих тебя, и злословящих тебя прокляну, и благословятся в тебе все племена земные. Потрясающие стихи.
Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Great words, wonderful words. And in these verses, in these lines, there is this very great meaning is hidden in between. And we read from the next chapter, chapter 13. We are reading verse 13. I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants can also be numbered. So we hear or we read in all of these verses the command, Avram, go where I will show you, but leave the place where you are. And to him a great fruit was promised. And, well, Did Abraham believe in that very moment what God had said? Well, he, whatever, did what he was ordered to do. He executed the command that was given to him. And here I wanted to put an exclamation mark that Abraham was never quarreling with God. He was just executing the command. He was obedient. So God declares as for one man a great thing. Do one thing, and the great thing that I promise to you will come through you or because of you. So in the Bible there are many years, hundreds of years, thousands of years are hidden in the Bible. And what do we see in all of these years that are hidden in the Bible? These descendants that were promised by God, being like sand scattered all over the world, disappeared and is spread throughout all the nations. The thing is that we do not deal with just a single person, but we deal with God. It just could not be that God did bless 75-year-old Abraham and then he disappeared throughout the history of history, or that he was hidden somewhere. And this is where I wanted to underline a certain passage, meaning you shall be a blessing. And this is a truth which is shattering. Descendants of Abraham are like sand on earth, and they are also carrying God's covenant. You can imagine this like a huge pile of sand. And every little piece of sand was to work within this big pile. Every corn of sand is actually working. And the smallest part of this pile of sand should be a blessing for people, for the people among this corn, this sand was living. And I would say that there are certain criteria that God is postulating among the descendants of Abraham. And as for this criteria, we can determine if this person, being male or female, is truly a descendant of Abraham or not. And in you, Abraham, all the nations of the earth will be blessed in your son, in the prophet like Moses, in the son of David. And in Romans, the letter to the Romans, there are such words. Not those are children of Abraham according to the flesh, but heirs according to the Spirit. These are heirs of Abraham, or the descendants of Abraham. This means not only according to the circumcision in the flesh, but also according to the Spirit. And this is in the imperative form, or this is mandatory. And we continue to read in the Torah words like, we are reading words that are reflected throughout the whole history of the nation of Israel and the history of the world. In Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 18 and 19. I will raise up a prophet from among their countrymen like you, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall come about that whoever will not listen to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I myself will require of him. Not that we are going to lose these thoughts from our mind, I would like to repeat it. First, the line that I stumbled, there was a man sent from God, and his name was ... And the second thought is, be a blessing for one another. And today we are going to speak about these things. We read that all of those who have accepted Yeshua in their heart are gifted with the Holy Spirit. So people from other nations who came to the Messiah, who came to Yeshua the Messiah, are heirs of Abraham according to the Spirit. And we know that Jews who are born of Jews, flesh from flesh, who are descendants according to the flesh, so the descendants of Abraham are Jews and non-Jews, but are people who have Yeshua in their heart. And then take upon themselves everything that we have just read. And we know that Abraham was sent by God. And he was marked because he did not ask questions, but just following the command. And this way, this path that God showed to him, Abraham did know very well.
Существовали две фразы, я как-то говорил здесь об этом. Они произносились на еврейском языке и звучали как на асе и бенешма.
So even then I mentioned this among the Jews. There were two words, two phrases that were spoken like this, Aseh and Venishma, meaning, of course, I ask people from Israel and they know these phrases. And they use them in daily life. Meaning, we will do it and we will hear it. We will do it and we will understand it. We will hear, we will understand, we will do. And this foundation, this basis, should be like a red thread, should be in our heart, as this red thread is as well in the Bible. And so in us there should be a certain mechanism start to work for us in order to do that. Not just approach it like, well, we read it in the Bible, we know it. And you have to be born again. We read in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, Matthew chapter 16, verses 15 to 17. Matthew 16, verses 15 to 17. Yeshua is asking his disciples, his followers, who do you say that I am? Who am I? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Yeshua said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. We are going to translate this into our language, and we do hear the following. Blessed, happy are you, Peter, because you are born of God. And this is the most important thing. We are to be born again, so that we can understand the whole book, the whole Bible. That we understand that the Torah was also written in our language and that we will understand every single word. We read in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 12 to 13. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And this is the most important thing we should live through, the second birth.
Никогда не мог понять Мессию. В этом же Евангелии, в 3 главе, Никодим никак не мог понять Иешуа, что он хочет сказать ему, заново родиться.
In the 3rd chapter of John, of the Gospel of John, there was Nicodemus, and he was a wise man, and somehow he could not understand the Messiah, what his teaching was about.
Люди вот такого порядка, рожденные от Бога, они особое потомство на земле.
So Nicodemus could not understand what it means to be born again, but the people who were born again are special descendants being born of God. They are the sand of the earth. These people who are the salt, not the sand, who are the salt of the earth, and they are a blessing wherever they go or wherever they come to, which means you have to change your own life. You have to want to change your own life. Now we are going to switch to examples of nowadays living. In 2007, in the afternoon program, here was a young woman standing and made call for those who could separate from coffee and cake, and her program was something like a confession. Was a little lady from the US, and her music and her words brought into the room quite an enormous power, spiritual power or strength. Her name was Sally O'Connor, or is Sally O'Connor. She told that earlier that she had lost her name, Sally O'Connor, and for a long time she had received another name, and this name was Scarface. Scarface, having scars in her face. And her face was deformed or ugly because of a big dog that she had encountered when she was a child. And soon people stopped calling her Sally, and all people, neighborhood, school, started to call her Scarface. And this is how she was known. And her real name was forgotten by everybody.
Sorry, ganz kurz, also Henke, du kennst sie auch, ja, sie war bei uns auch hier. Sie war
He's talking to Helga and remembering her, Sally O'Connor.
И я опять вспоминаю ту же фразу, которую вы слышали.
Und jetzt kommt mir schon wieder dieser Gedanke.
And now a thought is coming back to me from the beginning of the sermon.
Имя ему ...
Es war ein Mann gesendet
There
von
was
Gott,
a
und sein
man
Name war
sent from God, and his name was ...
Не только с очень знаменитыми людьми.
Also solche Sachen, die sind nicht nur in
So
Zeiten passiert.
these things did not just happen in biblical times with like historical, meaningful persons.
Lass uns unser Leben zurückblättern
Let us flip back in our own life,
Точно этого человека мне послал Бог.
und da bestimmt können wir uns erinnern,
and for sure we will remember having met somebody of whom we would say this person was sent from God. And it was the same with this young lady.
einmal hat sie einen Menschen getroffen, die
Once she met a lady who helped her to remember her proper name.
und wurde ihr zum Segen.
And this became a blessing for her.
И снова стала Сэнди.
Und sie wurde auch durch ihn gläubig.
And through him she became a believer in Yeshua the Messiah. And she became once again Sally.
Что его послал Бог. Что это ее муж, который спас ее. Что его послал Бог.
Und sie hat erzählt, dass es war ihr
And
Mann,
she told that her husband,
vor einiger Zeit gesendet hat.
that God had sent some time ago.
Sie hat Familie und
She has a family and is very happy having 3 daughters.
Und so hat Sally das Segen bekommen, dass
And this is how Sally received the blessing that was promised in the Torah to Abram. Now, another story.
Freundinnen waren halt aus seiner Klasse gelassen.
There were 2 friends, girlfriends, comrades from one school class. One was very beautiful, spent quite a lot of time in front of the mirror.
Und die andere war
And
ein normales Mädchen,
the other one was just a normal
oder unscheinbar.
girl, similar maybe to an ugly duckling.
Die lebte durch ihre
And the beautiful one, she was living because of her beauty, by her outward appearance, her outward beauty.
ihre unansehnliche Freundin
And
war immer
her friend, the ugly duckling,
für die Schöne begeistert.
always was in favor of this beautiful girl
Ihr schöne Kleider anzusehen.
and was happy seeing her friend with new clothes, beautiful clothes, new shoes, and was always happy because of her friend.
Kein Neid in ihr, und das war
She did not envy her friend, and this was wonderful.
sie war darin gut, Freundschaft zu pflegen oder
And she was good in maintaining friendship or being a good friend. And she was proud having such a beautiful friend.
aber manchmal sah sie ganz traurig aus.
But sometimes she looked very sad because at home when she looked in the mirror at herself,
Und dachte, ja, so bin ich.
and she thought, well, that's how I am. I have to live like that or with that. But these 2, they were in need of one another. And the beautiful girl loved to make plans or to exchange her ideas, plans with the other one. And at a certain time, school was over, and the beautiful one went into another city where she was to study at a university. For a while there was still some communication, but then this stopped, and both of them had their individual life. So the second friend, who was not that beautiful, she had a dream to become a teacher, and she was striving for that. When she was invited for a date, she did not accept it, because she had always the same thought, the same idea. She thought, what about I like him, and then he will not call me anymore, and this will be a torture for me, so better not. So she had no private life as for that. She refused to have a private life like that. But once in the bibliothèque, there was a young man helping her with some books, bringing them to the table where she was. And she had seen him several times. He was limping quite a bit, and he had to walk with a cane. And then they happened to sit at the same table in the bibliothèque, and they are speaking with low voices as normal, and this young man is always looking at her and smiling at her. He could speak quite interestingly, but then all of a sudden she could not withhold her, and she had to ask him, because he was always smiling at her. And she asked, "Why are you constantly smiling at me?" "Because you are a beautiful person." Then she became like pinkish or like rosé in her life, because it was the first time that she had heard something like that. She liked to sit at the same table with this young man, but she responded quite excited, or she told him, "Well, you don't even know me, so how can you say this?" Then he was laughing out loud, and he said, "Well, I have eyes. Can't you tell? And I don't believe that nobody has ever told you that." Then she got alive even more, and he suggests to her, going to the theater together if she wouldn't mind for him having this handicap. And not expecting it even for herself, she agreed, despite having always refused in the past. And then the man lights up, and they are walking, telling about their lives. He was a sportsman, but once he got injured seriously, and the treatment he did not finish his treatment because he didn't want to let his team alone. So he returned to the team. He fell down, hurt himself the more, and then this handicap. And the doctors told him, "This will be for the rest of your life." And he came into a deep depression. He didn't want to see anybody. And he thought more and more about suicide because he didn't want to live as a handicapped person. He was in hospital. People brought him music, books. He did hear something and did read something, but he could not get himself out of this situation. And then there was a new visitor. It was a young man in a wheelchair, and they spoke for quite a long time. And when this young man in the wheelchair left him, he left on his night table the gospel. And this sportsman, he kept reading all night through, and the words of Yeshua fell into his heart, or entered his heart. When he woke up in the morning, he prayed, or no, he did not pray, but he asked to be dismissed from hospital. Now he is a student, or he's studying at the university. So he understood when he remained alive, he should do something and help someone else, like the man in the wheelchair, who for sure was sent to him from God. Now we go back to these two girlfriends. So since school was over, 15 years have passed by, and the beautiful girl did visit the other, and then her family at home. They were together. They have been together for 9 years. The third child was born, and this beautiful girl looked at her, saying, "I envy you. I was married twice. I had many men, but I was never happy, because my happiness was only for a short time always, and you have such a wonderful family, such beautiful children, and you have become very beautiful." So there was a man sent from God, and his name was handicapped in a wheelchair. He was sent to a sportsman who was in a critical situation in order to give him life and to give it to him in abundance. Or his name is sportsman with handicap, was sent to a young woman, neither believing in happiness nor in herself, to a lonely woman, in order to give her life and life in abundance. Or the other way around, she was sent to him so that they both would have life in abundance. As we might say, this is like God's plan that cannot be understood from the beginning, but now develops, and it's like predestination. And there are many stories like this.
Jetzt Mutter Teresa.
Now, Mother Therese,
Und ihr Name war gesendet durch Gott.
and her name was sent from God.
Исход 19 глава, 5-6 стих.
Wir lesen im zweiten Buch Mose 19. Ja,
We read in Exodus 19, verses 5 and 6. Exodus chapter 19, verses 5 and 6.
Ибо моя вся земля.
Und nun, wenn ihr willig auf meine Worte hören und meinen Mund halten werdet, sollt
Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine.
ja, das klingt für mich wie
For me, this
Vorschlag.
sounds like a suggestion from your employer,
Будете у меня царством священников и народом святым.
Denn wir lesen weiter.
because we continue to read, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
Wir lesen halt über alles in diesen Worten.
And we can read everything in these words.
Und ich kann das gut formulieren, und zwar
And I can change these words and saying like the spiritual testimony, or the testimony of the spiritual rebirth. And it is about people who could be born again for the second time. And Peter said the same thing. The first letter to 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10.
Священство, народ святой, люди, взятые в удел, дабы возвещать совершенство призвавшего вас из тьмы в чудный свой свет. Некогда не народ, а ныне народ Божий.
But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who has called you out of the darkness into His marvelous light. For you once were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. You could say this is like an alarm to, or a registration through the police, seeing in heaven. Like, for example, if someone asks, "Who are you? What are you doing?" and you can show a paper, "I'm registered in heaven." There was a man sent from God, and his name was
Этот человек, который послан к ней, стал благословением, мужем и отцом ее ребенка.
Sally O'Connor. She had lost her name, but because of this man sent from God, she did receive a blessing, and she became her husband, and he became her husband and the father of her children. And now she brings her story as a blessing throughout all the world. So the man who was sent from God was a young man in a wheelchair, leaving a gospel, or the gospel, on the night table of a person, of a man who had wanted to die. And he is a blessing for this sportsman. And this sportsman, with his handicap, he was sent to this young woman at the right time, telling her, saying to her, "You are beautiful," giving her the new life.
сообщает этой красавице, которая приехала к нему, да, смотрит на их жизнь, ничего, о чем она никогда не думала.
Und dann teilen sie
And then they
diese schönen Gästen etwas
share
Wichtiges im Leben mit, woran
to
sie dann
their
auch niemals
share something beautiful with their guests, which she had never thought of,
sie hat ihr Leben auf den
because
falschen Werten aufgebaut.
she, or to her beautiful guest, because she was building up her life on wrong values.
Wir sind das königliche Priestertum.
We are the kingly priests, and we carry in us the perfection and the blessing of Yeshua the Messiah.
Überall sind wir Prediger, die
Everywhere we are preachers and priests.
sollen wir aber nicht an unser Verstand und Herz nicht vergessen.
But we should not forget our mind and our heart, otherwise we would say many wrong things.
Und egal wo wir hingehen,
And no matter where we go, we will bring the blessing. Or the question is where we are losing it.
fangen natürlich mit unseren Nächsten an.
Of course, we begin with our neighbors.
Füreinander.
We are sent to one another.
Благословением для человека на другом конце города, если ты сам не являешься благословением в своем ближайшем окружении.
Also es ist unmöglich,
So it is impossible for someone to be a far-reaching blessing without being a blessing to your neighbor
Но не своего
or in the closer environment.
sollten wir von uns sozusagen mit uns selber
But to begin, we are with ourselves, not with a neighbor.
быть благословением для меня.
mein Nächster ist nicht
My neighbor is not obliged to be a blessing for me.
Благословением для своего ближнего.
ich bin verpflichtet für ihn.
I am obliged to be a blessing for him.
Если мы не сумели стать благословением для ближнего,
Und wenn wir es nicht geschafft haben,
And if we did not succeed to be a blessing for our neighbor,
die Bibel lesen,
повторяя с умным видом
though we read the Bible,
ее истины,
wo wir mit einem klugen mit einer klugen Äußerlichkeit ihre Wahrheiten wiederholen,
если мы
are we to repeat the truth just by a
являемся
smart outward appearance?
красивые слова, пустой смоковниц.
also trotz aller schönen Worte,
Despite all these beautiful words, we are an empty fig tree if we are not a blessing to our neighbor.
И находить, и быть.
wie die Juden sagen, suchen, finden, sein.
Да не скудит
As some say, to seek, to find, to be. Let our heart and our soul not become void, and the hearts should be turned towards one another.
не имеет права покидать нас.
Weder unsere Liebe noch unsere Geduld haben
Not our love nor our patience have the right to leave us.
sonst bringen wir keinen Frieden.
Otherwise, we will not bring fruit. Amen.